First, I just want to say thanks to Stockholm Hardware and Sune for having me here. It's an honor. I heard from a friend here that you're a really, techie and knowledgeable audience. So I'm looking forward to some questions. So I'm going to talk about voice. What I hope to do here, my talk is called "What's Going On with Voice." I hope to give you guys a kind of a orientation or an intro to voice technology. So I want to bring some learnings to you guys from a bunch of voice projects we've done. I'm also going to put in a bit of a sneak peek of Noodle, the platform that the next workshop on the 14th is going to be about. It's going to be a very quick one, so but you get at least a sneak peek. First, a few words about myself. So I'm an engineer, but work in UX and have been working in the UX business for a couple of years now. I co-founded a company called Topp. We are about 32 people, mainly based in Malmö. So I can see there are a few fellow people from Skåne here, but we also have a small office here in Stockholm and office in San Francisco. We are, I would say, we specialize in pretty tech-heavy projects, I would say. We have, of course, the regular, what you expect to find in a UX agency in terms of designers, researchers, but we also have a fair amount of prototypers, and we built our prototyping platform Noodle to kind of make it possible for us to get hands-on with technologies such as voice. I want to say a few words. Again, we try to work with quite complex technology and across different industries. So we have a quite wide range of types of clients. And we have seen voice popping up as a very, very common kind of interaction method in many projects, from Samsung obviously, but also in the automotive industry, in Schneider, meaning home automation or building automation, etc., etc. So it's a very hot topic now. But is it really happening now? Is voice? I mean, we all know, the friend we have who has a Echo on their desk and never uses it. Is it really happening now, or is it still a hype? I don't know. I mean, Siri has been around since 2011, so that's not new. This is been around since forever. I think this is actually from BlackBerry. When I worked in BlackBerry for a number of years ago. BlackBerry may not be the hottest company right now, but we were doing plenty of voice, especially in automotive, back in 2010. And I have ordered furniture from IKEA for many years, and it's furnished my whole apartment. And I always talk to this IKEA lady when the furniture is being delivered, and she asks me in her very nice semi-robotic voice if I have an elevator or not at home. So voice is obviously nothing new. So is there actually anything going on that's different now? Ooh, that green color looks nice. I would say it is. I think there are two kind of forces coming from opposite direction, at least in my depiction here. We have, of course, a maturity in voice technology, and this is coming, I would say, mainly from the advancements in machine learning and how machine learning has been applied to voice technology. So the actual tech itself has just improved immensely the last few years. And I would say also users or, people are getting more and more used to talk to their things or talk to their home. It's not really there yet, but we can see a maturity in the research we do. And I think from the other side, the kind of always connected or the kind of mobile lifestyles we have today, there is a strong need to have your connected services available at all times. And that doesn't always mean that the phone is the best way to have that. So I think there is now the phone is now being challenged as the only way to kind of interact with those services. And I would say the final need or the final trend we see is that new types of technology are entering the market. Most importantly, the VR and AR, where screens or phones are, not the best way to interact with those experiences. And actually, that hasn't really been solved yet, and voice may play a role there. The Gartner hype curve, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. This is 2017. It says that, I found kind of it says virtual assistants. That's the closest to voice I get here. It's still a few years ahead before it actually kind of crosses the valley here and becomes a mainstream technology. But I think we're pretty close now. I mean, voice have really evolved. I'm gonna just quickly take you on a tour here where, it started out with just simple commands, where you just told your car to make a call, or that was, I would say, the most common use case. But you just give commands to a device. Then through Siri and Google Assistant, you started using your voice to find information on internet. But basically, it's another way an alternative to doing a Google search. I think what we've seen kind of the last few years, and of course primed, I would say, with Amazon Alexa, is the move towards the conversational UIs or conversational experiences, which is actually just still the same. You're kind of submitting a command to a machine or a service, or you're asking for information, but the kind of software, the voice software, is guiding you through some kind of conversation. But actually, what you're doing is only filling out a form. You kind of ask for flights to Las Vegas, and you get the response, okay, when do you want to fly, etc., etc. It's basically a form you're filling out, but with your voice. So still, I would say, pretty simple. And I would say here is where we are today, unless you are Google, of course. I don't know if anyone saw the Google I/O or the duplex. That was the kind of the hottest thing on Google I/O. Of course, that's a very interesting piece of technology they showcased there. I would call this a natural conversation, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. So this is where we're heading right now, but I would say this is where we still are. All right, so quickly, let's just talk about how you go about if you're thinking about, connect your next project to some kind of voice technology, or your next product to some voice technology. How do you go about? Where do you start? I mean, of course, you can do it the hard way. So I kind of split this up into 4 different levels. You can start by, create your own voice technology or create your own voice framework. Most people don't do that. This is for the kind of Googles or Amazons or similar companies. So probably you're gonna do either level 3 or level 4, meaning either you hook into an existing voice framework, a little bit as we saw the girls do here. It's pretty simple. There are plenty out there. You have Alexa or the Amazon ecosystem. You have the Google ecosystem. You have the Bing, the Microsoft ecosystem, and there are also kind of B2B solutions, IBM, etc., etc. But actually, there's even a more simple way. If you're a service, or you can also just make sure your content is discoverable for voice assistants. That's probably the easiest way to kind of get some presence. Make sure your whatever you want to make the content you have is discoverable for a voice assistant, so people can ask their phone about it. But level 3 here, let's look a little bit more on that, because that's the more accessible one, and still where you have some way to actually do some design on your own or add some functionality to your product. So these voice frameworks, they are a little bit like UI frameworks, so graphical frameworks, but of course much more simple. And you know, in a UI framework, you have plenty of types of lists, and the lists have momentum scrolls, and you have tabs, etc. So many different components that can make you can use them to build a very rich UI experience. Voice is a little bit more sparsmakat, as we say in Swedish. A little bit, there are not so much to choose from. The typical building blocks, and this is how I would say most voice services who are cloud-based work, are these four. And I'm going to show you a little bit how they work, but you have intents, so that's kind of an abstract definition of a function, I would say, that your user may want to invoke. And then you have utterances, and that's phrases that your users will use to kind of invoke this function. So there are often a lot of different utterances that maps to the same intent, because you don't know really what the user is going to say. And then these utterances are going to have slots, and slots are the important parameters in what the users say that you want to take action on, and send to the cloud or send to your machine, or how you plan to use this function. And each slot has a slot type, meaning that it's kind of a data type. So a slot, for example, could be a city. You want someone to name a city, and then you can say that, this slot is supposed to be a city. And then this makes it easier for the voice service to know that, there's probably going to be a city name here, so it can it can train or set up its machine learning network or its voice software to listen to cities, so to say. I'm going to make it, here's an example. Or actually, I'm going to switch. So I'm going to switch to Noodle now, just to show you how Noodle works, and it's also kind of a good description of how the intents and slots, etc. works. I think it should be fine. So here's a small product I built for you. So Noodle is a little bit like Node-RED, actually. It probably reminds you of Node-RED if you use that. I'm not going to go into details, but basically what you see here are a bunch of nodes that together make a very simple weather app. So here on to the left, you see this is an intent. It's kind of difficult to see, actually, unfortunately, but it says it's an intent, and this is my weather intent. And I can configure, I'm going to add utterances to this weather event. So when a user speaks one of these utterances, this intent will trigger, and what happens then? Here is weather data. It's a REST service I use to get the weather in a city. So obviously, you can see this little, let's see if I can zoom in here, connections. It kind of sends a city to this weather data node, and then the REST API will kind of call or make a call and get the weather for that particular city. And this node here, format response, is basically formatting a response back. Okay, the weather in X is Y, basically. And then I have a voice out node, so it is going to be spoken back, and it's going to be displayed in a card here as well. So let's look at this intent, the weather intent. So we have built, this is Noodle, but we have built a lab around, in this case, Amazon Lex and Amazon Poly, so Amazon's voice services, to make it easier to work with when we do voice projects, basically. Yeah, it's a free tool. So you can go to getnoodle.com and download it and try it out, basically. So it's an open free tool. So here, I don't know, you can't see this, right? Hardly. Anyway, up here are the different utterances to trigger the weather event. So the first one is, what's the weather in, and then it's a city slot. And then next one is, please tell me the weather in, and then a city. How's the weather in city? So it's this is pretty bare bone, I would say. This is how Alexa, etc. Works. You have to kind of guess a little bit what the user is going to ask. But you can add many of these. All right, let's see if I can have better luck with Alexa. So I'm gonna just try to ask the weather here. And keep, you're gonna actually see the data flows here. So, what's the weather? What's the weather in Chicago?
The weather in Chicago is 38 degrees and clouds.
Yeah. So this is, I used one of the utterances, and the intent was triggered, and the weather data was collected through the REST API, and I just read back the response as a voice out. Super simple example, and obviously you can build, this is a variation I did on the train, where I can ask if it's summer using the same data source, etc., etc. But this is kind of the level where these services are at. So that's good to know. All right, let's. So being a UX designer, I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities we've seen when we worked with voice. They are mostly related to the new type of needs that are coming up, just to have your just because people who just want to get connected, and also that there are some new types of hardware coming out on the market, or new types of technology. Of course, for smart home, one of the main use cases are around things like cooking, where people are using recipes online, and they use their dirty tablet in the kitchen, and they move between the tomato sauce and the tablet all the time. We also see some business scenarios here in like clean rooms where you're not allowed to bring in dirty technology, etc. I talked about AR and VR, where voice are some of the main candidates to kind of solve the UX problem they have there. There are also very interesting example in the living room, I think, where your eyes, can't be on the screen, or should not be on the screen. We've worked actually quite a lot with, having your phone close to your TV, but it's very distracting to kind of interact with your phone. So voice may be a candidate there. We've done some projects there as well. I think one of the more interesting one is around using the power of language. So there are some cases that's been around for 5-10 years in your phones. For example, sharing, it's still very complicated. You have a picture, you get a long list of sharing options, you click on that sharing option menu, and you get a long list of contacts, etc., etc. Like those kind of cross application scenarios are very difficult to there is no good solution to do classic screen UI. Whereas in language, you know exactly what you want to say. You want to share this image to mom through WhatsApp. Something that you kind of have in your mind already, and speaking those words are so easy compared to going through a UI flow, even if there's been 10 years or so in the making of designing those flows. So I think there are some interesting cases there. I think that's basically the some of the insights that I want to share. I'm happy to show you a little bit more of Noodle after the talk. And again, 14th, take a deep dive in Noodle. Come here and join the workshop. Thank you.
If people have questions, we can take that.